Welcome back to Data Innovation Summit 2019. I'm joined here with a member of Vertica's team at our conference. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Robert, for the introduction. My name is Mark Whalley. I'm a Vertica systems engineer working within the Microfocus organization. I've got about sort of 4 decades of relational database management experience, starting out in the early 1980s with a gentleman called Michael Stonebreaker's Ingress relational database management system. So quite a legacy working through to Vertica. I'm also the organizer of 2 big data and machine learning meetup groups. One's based in London, and we typically operate out of Google campus in London. Another one in the Cambridge Science Park, out of a company called Jagex. We're about 4,500 members, so very active community, and that's a little bit of background to myself.
Okay, so you said Ingress, and that reminds me of Postgres, and then these are all databases. Vertica, you said you work with database. Is Vertica just a database?
Well, I could answer that in one very, very quick answer and walk out the door by saying yes, it's just another SQL database.
Okay.
And that is a problem that I think we all have in that there are so many competing in the market at the moment. If we steal sort of one of the UK high streets retail's sort of taglines, Vertica is not just another SQL database, it's an analytics database. And so that is one of its sort of key areas there. Mentioned Stonebreaker. Michael Stonebreaker, back in the late 1970s, designed and built with some colleagues from MIT one of the world's first online transaction processing relational database management systems. Let's say it was called Ingress, from which many other database technologies were designed and built. Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, all designed and built for that very, very sort of use case, online transaction processing workloads. They're still there today, of course. Oracle's still there, SQL Server's still there, Ingress is still there, although less heard of. But the world has changed. Today, yes, we still need OLTP databases, but the world has changed in so much as customers and users are now trying to analyze data from a far greater number of data sources, different data types at the same time, the ever-increasing velocity of the data that's arriving and be able to handle that data, to load that data, to process that data, to be able to not just query data over the last week or the last month, but to do so over the last 10 years or beyond. Right. And to do so running queries with sub-second response times. They don't want to have that, I have to wait for my report to be generated. They want to have a conversation with the data so that they can run a query and in sub-seconds get that response. Now the legacy OLTP databases, brilliant as they are for what they were designed for, just can't cut it. Yes, they can't, no matter what you do to them, you can't make them do what they weren't designed to do. I think the analogy I like to use is, you buy a Ferrari, you don't go and drive it up a snow-capped mountain. Yes, it wasn't designed for that. It might do it, but it wasn't designed for that. So, say Stonebreaker, back in 2014, he was awarded the
Turing
Award, thank you, the Alan Turing Award in 2014 for his contributions to database technologies. In 2004, having, as I say, previously built and designed Ingress, and you mentioned Postgres, of course, he built Postgres as well, he realized that what he had designed and built was now being used for purposes that it wasn't designed for.
Right.
So he co-authored a paper called the C-Store, Column Orientated Relational Database Management System. And from that, he then went on to design and build what we now know as Vertica today.
Okay.
So Vertica was designed, built for today's modern analytic workloads. Yes, it's not an OLTP database, so we're not trying to push out the OLTP types of this world. But I say it was designed and built from that first line of code to address those workloads.
That's interesting. The database technology compared to, say, AI technology, is extremely mature, has a lot of best practices, has a lot of, you can look at implementations and say that these worked well and these didn't work well. And so I guess Vertica then takes a lot of those learnings and then including the person that founded the C-Store paradigm or created it and brings them straight into Vertica.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we consider ourselves to be a mature product, yes, in so much as we've been around since 2005, yes, so we have inbuilt into the database the things that data scientists, data analysts are looking for. I typically talk today to data scientists, and we have a booth here, as you know, and have a number of people coming along to us. And I always ask, if I may ask a data scientist, could they estimate the amount of time that they spend in their daily workload of doing data science? How much of their time do they spend doing data exploration, data preparation, before they could even get on to doing the real nuts of the work, which is data science, yes, machine learning. And I get figures everything from being 60, but more likely 80 to 90% of their time they're spending preparing, understanding what the data is.
Right.
So anything we can do within the database to do so at speed, to make that journey a little bit easier, makes the data scientist's life a little bit easier, so they can cut down that 90% of their time down to 10% of their time. So we have things like data preparation tools, like one-hot encoding, gap filling and interpolation, sessionization, and all these.
And even on the ETL layer.
Even on the ETL layer too. So yes, you take on the ETL layer. On the data ingestion side, one of the hardest concepts of getting through is how do you ingest data at speed and at volume into any columnist or database technology. Vertica works beautifully with the likes of Apache Kafka, which may have come across as a messaging bus. So rather than addressing the needs of trying to load single rows of data one at a time, we can use Kafka's messaging bus to say load data every 5 or every 10 seconds and do so at great speed. Yes.
I have to ask, I'm a little bit skeptical. A lot of times when you buy databases, you get the database and it's real good, and then you want to do something useful and you have to have an add-on in order to connect it to Kafka, and you need an add-on in order to get clustering mode activated, or all the cool stuff that you actually do want. So it's not enough to just have the database. Is Vertica a suite like that, or how do you typically work with it?
Very much so. Vertica is very much so. It all comes in one box. Yes. So you bring your analytics platform database Vertica to the party. It has everything that you possibly need to do everything from the data ingestion to the data preparation.
So those aren't separate things. They're part of Vertica.
Part of Vertica. So if you want to do machine learning with predictive analytics, so logistic regression, linear regression, naive Bayes, they're just functions within the database. So they're already there, already built in. Geospatial's already in place as well.
I think you mentioned earlier, before we were on camera here, that there's a community edition, so you can go and try it and stuff. Are those things available in the community edition? So if I want to try clustering, if I want to try machine learning, ingestion from Kafka and that kind of stuff, is that stuff that's included?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole design principle of our engine is that we have a single RPM install. So the single RPM install is both the enterprise edition of Vertica, which is the paid for licensed version, right down to the community edition. The only restrictions with the community edition, and we have to apply some sort of restrictions, are that yes, it's free. Yes, there are some limitations on the volume of data, and it's 1 terabyte of data, which is more than enough to kick the tires with, and you cannot deploy on more than 3 compute nodes.
Okay.
Now, many of our prospects who are playing with the community edition will install it on a virtual machine on a laptop, so absolutely perfect.
Right,
yep.
So you can try clustering and everything.
You can try clustering, and that's one of the reasons why we allow it to go up to 3 nodes, because Vertica has high availability built in from source. So in the event of a node failure, Vertica continues to operate, but that only comes into play when you have 3 nodes or more. So we give you the 3 node option within the community edition to try that out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's pretty neat. I have to say, I like Raspberry Pis, so I recognize what's on the table here, but I'm not exactly sure what Raspberry Pi has to do with Vertica. I hope you're not saying that organizations would run their database on the Raspberry Pi. Is that what you're going to say?
I'm certainly saying that, yes. And although technically capable of running Vertica, I wouldn't even envisage trying to get Vertica running on here.
Okay.
It's interesting project, and this is why I brought this up on stage here, was any database technology, it's not just Vertica, but any database technology is not the sort of thing you can talk about excitedly about saying this is a sexy thing to look at. There's nothing to visualize. So what I wanted to do a couple of years ago is I developed a project that I wanted to share with I mentioned the Big Data and Machine Learning Meetup group. I wanted our participants to be able to follow a project that they could do themselves at minimal cost, to show what you could do with Vertica as the database backend. So this is a project which I used the Raspberry Pi for, where I am tracking commercial aircraft, tracking commercial aircraft in real time using, as I say, the Raspberry Pi, Apache Kafka, and Vertica as the analytics database. And the typical example, we have 3 of these at the moment. One's located in Geneva, one located in JFK, or just outside JFK Airport, and I have another one in my hometown in South Wales.
You have a little GPS receiver and some
Yep.
kind of antenna, I guess?
Absolutely, I didn't bring the antenna into the stage here, but yes, we connect an antenna, so the antenna is about half a meter high. And a typical one of these, we have 3 of these set up, and they will pick up anything up to 100 million messages per day.
Wow,
Off
nice.
a single, a set of 3 of these.
But that's fun to look through once it ends up in the database.
Indeed, yes, so the database is growing quite naturally, and say yesterday we ran a workshop here where we had just over 30 people, 30 attendees, connecting into our Vertica database, which is sitting, in this instance, it's sitting in AWS, and I say we can deploy in any of the other clouds, so AWS, Google, and Azure. So they were quite happily connected to the AWS instance and seeing the live data streaming in from Geneva, New York, and South Wales. Yeah.
Cool. Well, it pays to be informed, so if you haven't heard of Vertica, give it a look. You can deploy it into the cloud, you can deploy it locally, and there's a community edition that helps you get started, right?
And one further one, you can also deploy inside and alongside any of the Hadoop distros. So if you're into Hadoop, you can deploy in there as well and ingest data from Hadoop.
Cool. Thanks for the tech intro, and we'll be seeing you again